implement different projects such as the solar farm, such as electric vehicles in the future, such as waste management in the future. Whatever it is, all of these things go to the core of this issue. And what then happens is once the feasibilities and the business cases and the costings are developed, they then come before council through our extensive budget process every year or through a long-term financial plan, and that's when council will decide whether this city can afford these types of initiatives or whether it can't. So I hope that assists with supporting that question.
Thank you, and I'd also we'll come to you, Councillor Sewell, but I would also like to ask our manager, Nicole, have we ever asked the community about climate change?
Thank you for the question. The City of Kalamunda undertook a community scorecard in 2020. It asks questions across all of our services. There is an area within the scorecard that is around leadership and advocacy, and we ask across a number of categories the following question: should the City of Kalamunda take a more active leadership and advocacy role in relation to the following causes? There are a number of different causes that are then listed. One of those causes is climate change and sustainability. The scorecard was answered by about 554 people. 4% strongly disagreed that we should take a more active role in relation to climate change and sustainability. 8 disagreed, 8% that is. 22% were neutral, and 67% either agreed or strongly agreed. The average for other local governments, this scorecard is actually undertaken by other local governments, and we use this scorecard as a benchmark across areas to see how we fare in comparison to other local governments. The average for other local governments who had undertaken this scorecard, keeping in mind they must have done it in the 2 years prior, was actually 61%, so we were 5% higher. And I understand that we had the industry high for the scorecard as well at 67%.
Thank you. Councillor Sewell, did you want to speak for the motion or ask a question?
I wanted to speak for the motion, but I believe Councillor Boyd wanted to ask a question.
Thank you, Councillor Boyd.
Yeah, thank you. I just have a follow-up question for the manager of PR. I'm just wondering, in reference to the information just given in regards to the scorecard, can the manager provide, has there been any aspects of the scorecard that's been that the city has then further gone out and asked sought further comments from the wider community, or policies or anything where public advertising has been initiated?
Manager?
Thank you very much for the question, Councillor Boyd. Yes, there are a number of occasions in which the City of Kalamunda will seek further consultation or more specific consultation in relation to areas.
Thank you. Now we have a speaker for the motion, Councillor Sewell.
The amendment that I put forward tonight was actually to strengthen the city's engagement with its community in a constructive and tangible manner, because this is a critically important issue. Whilst I have heard Councillor O'Connor's alternative motion to consult on whether we should declare a climate emergency, I'm actually of the view that the horse has actually bolted on this, and I believe our community want to see action, not more talk. And in fact, when I ran for council, that was actually what I was hearing when I was door knocking and when I was talking to people, was the lack of leadership in this area. I feel that having a discussion on whether we declare a climate emergency is of no benefit to anyone, and it will only serve to show that we're not courageous enough to make important decisions and to show leadership to ensure we protect the lives and livelihood of future generations. Over the past year, as we've already discussed somewhat tonight, we have consulted widely on topics of the environment, sustainability concepts, which go to the core of addressing climate change. I think climate change is new terminology for council, and I'm happy to hear that it's actually been incorporated in our terminology in the past year. Prior to that, it was not even discussed. And I ask, why not? Do we not agree that climate is under strain? Do we not agree that fires, storms, and increasing loss of biodiversity is intensifying? So why would we go out and ask of the community what we already know, that we are at the point where we are going to have to take critical action to deal with climate change so that we don't have more catastrophic events? Last year, we asked our community about views and perceptions on environmental sustainability. Of those, and Nicole has already referred to this, we've had 370 residents who shared their views. Already, 57.6% have solar panels and 94% of respondents have heard of solar farms. These results already tell us we have a community that is concerned and understands climate impacts, and they want us to do something about it. In 2020, we undertook our community satisfaction survey, and the community indicated they highly value the natural environment, with 97 of respondents in the last two community surveys saying that the city's bushland trees and natural vegetation is important. Climate change puts this at risk. Last year, we consulted on the strategic community plan, which we will be discussing tonight. And if you look at priority area 2, Kalamunda Clean and Green, over 80% rated priority area 2 as important or very important. We have consulted extensively and widely. And the reason why we're here tonight is to talk about climate change is because our community brought this to our attention last year. They want us to recognise that climate change is real, it's threatening our lifestyles, and for us as leaders of the community to do something about it. We need an action plan, and the community needs to see that what we're doing is tangible and necessary. This is an issue that is important for all levels of government, and we need to do our bit. And it is also a concept that may not be fully embraced if we just simplistically ask our community about declaring a climate emergency. It is likely to lead to the question, well, what will the city actually do? I believe our community will be more interested in knowing what we propose to do about climate change at the local level and consulting on an action plan that will have real tangible benefits, assisting community to understand the issues and comment on the actions. I believe this approach will certainly help the city to move forward, not backwards. It's a sensible approach, and I urge you all to support the officer's recommendation with the amendment. Thanks.
Is there a speaker against the motion? Councillor Boyd?
Go on.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I'll be somewhat briefer than Councillor O'Connor. I just want to raise a couple of things. There is no doubt, as the CEO mentioned, that signing a signature on a piece of paper costs us nothing. However, point 4 of the officer's recommendation indicates that the CEO will then provide a set of proposed actions, which he also did mention, on what the city's plan is going to be. And that's where obviously the cost to the city and to our ratepayers is going to lay. And I think it's important that if the city is going to sign our ratepayers onto this, and if that's what they choose, then so be it. Then we should have clear transparency around what it may look like. We've already scoped or had a look at the solar farm and what that looks like, which just gives an indication that some of these things aren't cheap. We already know that the city has invested in numerous projects like HZI, and we couldn't, I don't believe, do that on our own. Excuse me. So I just think, you know, I think it was at 10.1.2, we've already adopted to go out for public advertising this evening on another matter. We do it quite frequently. I believe a report from the manager of PR previously said 88 times in a year we go out for public advertising in one form or another, and I just don't think, excuse me, on a matter so important that could have such financial implications on the city and on our ratepayers doesn't deserve the same consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Boyd. Is there a speaker for the motion? Councillor O'Donnell.
Thank you. So we've heard from quite a few people over the last 18 months, and I don't know about other councillors, but if we don't know what our community thinks, perhaps we should have asked over the last 18 months, because that's what I've been doing. We've heard from parents, we've heard from children, we've heard from Greens, we've heard from volunteers, groups, firefighters, local community, environmentalists, and experts, and doctors. So I'm not sure what it's going to take for us to make this decision today. We choose between acting now or accepting that we've left it too late, and maybe our children will bear the consequences of our inability to make the right choice. Now, I think we as leaders need to step up and send a clear and strong message that we do take our community safety seriously and start addressing some of our actions in the time we have left. It's hard to believe that climate emergency means climate crisis means catastrophic risk and emergency action is required. It is hard. And we don't have time for this long debate. We need to answer how us as a council restores a safe climate at emergency speed. I read that if it's 4 degrees, our future is incompatible with an organised global community, is likely to be beyond adaptation, is devastating to be the majority of ecosystems, and has a high probability of not being stable. In a 4 degrees warmer world Earth, the Earth could support less than 1 billion people. We have 8 billion people, so I'd really hate to be the person that's not one of the 1 billion people that are left. I think, it's been clear, as we said, it's been clear for a decade this emergency action is required. Let's talk about the positives that will come from what we're looking at here. Safer community for our friends, our families, renewable energy, electric transport, bikes, 10-star homes, sustainable agriculture. People here are talking like that's a bad thing. I think it's a great thing. 81% of people in a survey made in Australia said we should try to prevent climate catastrophes, which may not occur for several decades or centuries, even if it requires making considerable change that will impact upon our current living standards. We are doing irreparable harm. Look at the Great Barrier Reef. Damage there is likely irreversible. Change is possible now. Let's talk about costs. Australia is vulnerable. We're expected to lose $159 billion because of sea level rises and drought-driven collapses in agriculture. That is $14,000 for each household. And I don't want to think about the cost of the rates when we only have less than 1 billion people in the whole entire world. Change is hard, like I said, but the risk of doing nothing is imminent. Public engagement, like the alternative, is the key in the next stage to tackle climate emergency. We need to go to the greenhousing, to carbon offsetting, to flood and heat risk. It's about a cultural change from us, but also from the community. It's about mitigating risk, but also adapting our practices to remove the risk entirely. We can build the community to get a large cross-section of people to contribute, particularly those who may never have been involved with the council or the services before. So, in closing, I hope that councillors will go with the alternative motion that Councillor Ritchie and Councillor Stallard have recommended. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Donnell. Is there a speaker against? I will go back to the mover for a right of reply. Councillor Ritchie.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have very little to say in closing, other than I have heard arguments about the cost of what it might cost us. I would leave you with one question. What is the cost of doing nothing?
Thank you, Councillor Ritchie. So we are now going to vote on 10.2.5 with the amendments. I hope everyone understands that. We've got a mover and a seconder. All those in favour? Councillor Giardina, Councillor Sewell, Councillor Stallard, Councillor Cannon, Councillor O'Donnell, Councillor Billich, Councillor Cooper, Councillor Blair, Councillor Ritchie, Councillor Thomas, and against Councillor Boyd and Councillor O'Connor. Motion is carried. Thank you very much. We're now going to have a short break, and while we would love the people in the gallery to stay with us and listen to the rest of our meeting, you are welcome to leave if you want to. Thank you. We'll have a 5-minute break. Did he have his grumpy pills and they're working?
And then he did speak today that he wasn't.
So Donna, he's been taking grumpy pills and they work.
They definitely work today.
Councillors, if you're ready, we will resume the meeting. I hope Councillor Boyd has had her break and has returned. So item 10.3.1, I'm taking to the back to item 15. So we'll move to 10.4.1, the adoption of the Kalamunda Advancing Strategic Community Plan. Councillors, do you have any questions? Councillor Ritchie.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is a question actually for the CEO. I guess my question, it relates to my ongoing concerns with perhaps the lack of environmental measures we put in place for planning and so on, and my particular concern that we had not fully implemented the 2008 biodiversity strategy. What I am encouraged by is the suite of policies and strategies which we have before us. And so my question is that given appropriate resourcing, are you able to provide an assurance that the actions arising from that suite of environmental policies and strategies as outlined in this plan and also in the business plan will be implemented?
Through the Chair, thank you for that question, Councillor Ritchie. I think the operative there is with proper resourcing. So resourcing is always going to be the issue. I can deliver anything council ever wants as long as it's resourced. So that comes with the cost and obviously, you know, the budget, which is a mandate of council to decide that. So certainly the strategies that are coming through now, in my view, our directors have got resources in most cases, and in areas where we need resources, we would bring that back on an annual basis. We would have a look at our service reviews. We would look at where we can find money, how we can find grants, external funding, all those sorts of things, as you know, what we do each year. So I think that, yes, the plans that have been put in place, I think, have been built realistically by the officers and their consultants. And as we go forward implementing the actions out of all of those strategies, we will assess them on an annual basis through our budget process, and we will look to put them into the corporate business plan. And the corporate business plan, as you know, is something that I'm held responsible for through my performance KPI, and something that I delegate downwards into all of directors and managers' KPIs. So they have a strong focus on those through the corporate business planning process, which I think has really matured in the city over the last 5 years in particular. So yes, I am relatively confident that we can deliver, and anything that I can't, I would bring straight back to council's attention for a discussion on how we can move forward with certain actions.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Councillor Boyd?
I think my question was similar to, I think it was Councillor Ritchie that asked the last one. It was just around the financial implications associated with implementing this. I think that's kind of been answered.
Thanks, Councillor Boyd. Yeah, similarly, that's all I can say. Your strategic community plan is the highest level plan. It's statements of intent. It's not an action plan. It's a statement of strategy and intent, and everything beyond that goes into resourcing plans, corporate business plans, informing strategies. That is our integrated planning framework that we're now charged with to deliver through the state department's legislation. And that is the only way we can operate, and they are annual decisions of council, or even long-term financial plans where if we can't deliver something next year, then we look towards delivering these plans in the future over the 10 years, as and when we can afford to, and as and when we can also advocate for funding, which is always our preference, to use other people's monies before we start to increase rates significantly.
Are there any other questions? Councillor Boyd, you have a follow-up question?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Just back to the CEO, is there any potential reputational risk to the city associated with that? And I guess that's around, in inverted commas, big ticket items that potentially won't be able to be implemented moving forwards?
Councillor Boyd, thank you for the question. When you say a big ticket item, what would you call a big ticket item? Do you have an example for me?
I'm just talking,
Generally.
Okay. $500,000 into the.
Do any of the directors or managers have a big ticket item they could?
Director of Asset Services?
Thank you. If I understand the questioning, as we develop our annual budgets, both operating and capital, and workshop them with council and then bring them to council for the adoption of the budget every year, the actions that would be contained in those budgets would have been prepared by the administration on the basis that they should be able to achieve them if circumstances don't change. So I think that's the throttle we have, was we can't put on a program projects knowing full well that they won't work. We're developing them ourselves on the basis that they will work.
Thank you. Managers, you've got a comment to make?
Yeah, thank you very much for the question, Councillor Boyd. Just to confirm and to reiterate, it really does follow on from the comments from the Director of Assets, that as a part of the review and then as a part of the subsequent development of the plan that is before the Council tonight, along with the community consultation, we did actually brief all managers and directors at the city in relation to what the community had said, so the results of the consultation, but also workshopped what that would look like. So the plan that is before you has input from every single business unit within the city, and as such, they are measures that we believe are achievable.
Are there any other questions? Councillors, I'm going to put the officer recommendation on page 78, and then I'm going to ask Councillor Cooper to outline her minor amendment, which you will have a copy of, which should say Ordinary Council Meeting 25th of May 2021, and that should be 2031, not 2013. That's just a typo, so in case you're confused. So do I have a mover for the officer recommendation on page 78? Councillor Ritchie, and a seconder, Councillor Sewell. And now I'm going to ask Councillor Cooper, what's your amendment?
My amendment is to point 3, adopt Kalamunda Advancing Strategic Community Plan 2031, subject to the following amendment. On page 22 of the plan, delete current strategy 2.1.4 and replace it with 2.1.4, increasing and protecting local biodiversity and conservation wherever possible through integrating ecosystem and biodiversity protection into planning processes, including schemes, policies and strategies. And if I can just say that I've, sort of kept a close eye on what the community has been telling us, and I thank them for all their input, and that's what's led me to do this change.
Thank you, Councillor Cooper. Does the mover and a seconder agree with that minor amendment?
Yes, I do.
Councillor Sewell?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. So, councillors, we are now looking at the amended recommendation. Is there going to be any debate? If not, I'm going to put the motion. All those in favour? Councillor Giardina, Councillor Sewell, Councillor Stallard, Councillor Cannon, Councillor Boyd, Councillor O'Donnell, Councillor Billich, Councillor Cooper, Councillor Blair, Councillor Ritchie, Councillor Thomas, and against Councillor O'Connor. The motion is carried. Thank you, councillors. 10.4.2 Calacash project update. Are there any questions, councillors? If not, is there a mover for the officer recommendation on page 86? Councillor O'Donnell, seconded by Councillor Sewell. Is there going to be any debate? I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Corporate business plan 10.4.3. Are there any questions? Is there a mover for the officer recommendation on page 90? Councillor Stallard, seconded by Councillor Cooper. Is there going to be any debate? I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Draft monthly financial statements. Councillors, you have an officer recommendation on page 98. Are there any questions? Do I have a mover? Councillor Ritchie, seconded by Councillor Blair. Is there going to be any debate? I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Just waiting on Councillor Boyd. That's carried unanimously. Councillors, 10.5.2, you have some questions and the responses have been provided. Thank you to Councillor Ritchie. Yeah, are there any other questions on the debtors and creditors report? If not, is there a mover for the officer recommendation on page 104? Councillor Blair and Councillor Cooper, is there going to be any debate? I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Rates debtors report. Are there any questions? The officer recommendation on page 109. Is there a mover? Councillor Cooper, seconded by Councillor Stallard. Is there going to be any debate? I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Differential rate. Councillors, do you have any questions? Councillor Sewell, you have a question.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I just wanted to know, just in some of the community feedback I've been getting in relation to this is questioning why we are choosing to go above CPI and the local government rate. And I'm just wondering, in the interest of those watching at home, whether that could be explained by the Director, please.
I'll go to the Director of Corporate Services.
Yeah, thank you for the question. Through the Chair, so the advertised differential rate percent of 2.15 was arrived at following a consideration of all economic indicators, including the CPI, projected CPI for 21-22, local government cost index, and also giving consideration as to the city's capital infrastructure programs. And remembering, of course, that we came off last year when we had a rate freeze, and notwithstanding that, costs obviously continue to increase. And as you can see in the report, in a comparable state compared to all other metro LGAs, we still rank at a fairly competitive rate in the dollar.
Are there any other questions, councillors? Is there a mover for the officer recommendation on page 118? Councillor O'Donnell, seconded by Councillor Cooper. Is there going to be any debate? I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. 10.5.5, there's a declaration of interest.
Through the Chair, just to remind you that this is my declaration of interest, but it is an impartiality interest. Thank you.
So, councillors, are we going to give the CEO some leave? Is there a mover for the officer recommendation on page 121? Councillor Jardina, seconded by Councillor Sewell. Is there going to be any debate? We'll put the motion. All those in favour? Councillor Stallard. That's carried unanimously. CEO, you have your leave. So, the City of Kalamunda Code of Conduct, council members, committee members and candidates. Are there any questions? Councillors, there's an amended officer recommendation. Does everyone have a copy of it that replaces the one on page 127? If there are no questions, is there a mover for that?
Names, got to have some names.
We need to have some names first. So, first of all, are there any questions? Councillor O'Connor, did you find that amended? Yes. So point 5, we need 3 other councillors to be on the Behaviour Complaints Committee. They can come from anywhere on council. If there's people who would like to be on it and it's only 3, we can do away with voting. We've got 3, Bill, O'Donnell and Giardina. Is there anyone who desperately wants to be on that?
Sorry, can I ask a question?
Yes.
In reference to that aspect, I'm just wondering, while in the past we had all councillors involved in this aspect, I'm wondering, do we have to have, or is it a necessary point to have just the 3 extra councillors, or should all the rest of us that are not involved, or any others that are not involved in a complaint, could or should they not be involved as well, so that all councillors are part of that process, or is that not necessary?
I think the idea around it, Councillor Stallard, was trying to get 12 councillors to a meeting at the same time outside of our normal meetings would be quite difficult.
It surely would be then just that the point would be a quorum would be all that's needed in that situation, would it not?
You can move an amendment to this motion, but at the moment we've just got this, so that's up to you.
Okay, sorry.
I'll ask the manager to make a comment.
The reason we've recommended a committee is for nimbleness to get the process rolling, because we've got timelines, and also confidentiality is a very important part of this,
okay.
And having a small committee allows us the opportunity to better maintain confidentiality. All other councillors will be appointed as deputies to this committee, so that in the instance where a member can't come, well, we've got deputies appointed. And the final say on any of these matters will go back to council anyway, so you will be involved in the long run.
So I think I read in there that there was the opportunity, if need be, to make further alterations to this as we go along. That's still true, is it not, for this situation?
Correct. This is all evolving, Councillor Stallard.
Okay.
It's new, we're getting new guidelines, new regs. So as we see things happening, we will bring back amendment reports until we're all kind of, comfortable and understanding what it is we're doing, because it is new territory.
So we have, Councillor Ritchie, you have a question?
Yes, I do have a question. I think it was raised by Councillor Sewell actually about the potential for training for people. Could we assume that if that training is to go ahead, because some people are not familiar with how to deal with this, that's quite understandable, that it would be for all councillors, not just the 3 or the 4 on it?
All councillors.
Thank you.
It just so happens that the 3 people that have put their hand up, including the mayor, represent all wards, so that's fortuitous. So with that in mind, a question, Councillor Sewell?
Just in terms of revising those committee members and any alterations to the composition of that committee, what is the timeframe surrounding that? I'm sorry if it's mentioned.
Could I suggest that we do it every 2 years in line with an election, because that's when there's potential change in the council, so would that be appropriate?
I think it would, but I think it would be useful if that's noted somewhere within the actual motion.
It's part of the legislation.
Oh, to do it every 2 years. Oh, okay, it's in there.
So councillors, with those names in there, do I have a mover for this amended officer recommendation? Councillor Sewell, seconded by Councillor Blair. Is there going to be any debate? I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Just waiting on Councillor Boyd.
Who's against?
She's not. So, Councillor Giardina, Councillor Sewell, Councillor Stallard, Councillor Cannon, Councillor O'Donnell, Councillor Billich, Councillor Cooper, Councillor O'Connor, Councillor Blair, Councillor Ritchie, Councillor Thomas, and against Councillor Boyd. The motion is carried. Thank you, councillors. Item 10.5.7, we will move to item 15. 10.5.8 also goes to item 15, as does 10.59 and 10.510. So we're now at 10.511. We have an amendment to the recommendation. As before, I'm going to ask for a mover and a seconder to the officer recommendation. Then I will go to the person, Councillor Boyd, who is putting up the amendment, and ask her to outline that, and I will ask if the mover and the seconder accept it. So moved by Councillor O'Donnell, seconded by Councillor Blair. Now we'll go to Councillor Boyd. Could you outline your amendment, please?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I think my amendment's quite simple. I just need to find it. It's primarily, off the top of my head, just adding in the words superintendent or inspector of the Midland District Office. In respect to who the Chief Executive Officer will be writing to arrange the meeting.
Thank you. Does the mover accept that amendment?
Sorry, I wanted to ask a question.
Councillor O'Donnell.
I'm just wondering why obviously the recommendation is exactly the same, but it refers to Midland. I'm just wondering why we wouldn't be writing to Forestfield, because this is where we've had the conversations with police before.
So perhaps we could go to Councillor Boyd to...
The director?
Director?
This was discussed at the suspect meeting, and obviously the OSC Forestfield Police Station is part of suspect, and it was discussed about I guess trying to advise obviously Forestfield Police Station in general are aware of the issues at the zigzag, but trying to advise people who have more authority in decision making for resources. If Forestfield Police Station are tied up, then it's they obviously come under Midland District. It's other resources from within the Midland District that would be sent over this way to respond. So advising the decision makers, I guess, of that lot that Forestfield Police Station lies within, of the issues was the consensus, and the expectation would be that the OSC Forestfield Police Station would also be part of those conversations as well.
So does the mover accept the amendment? Yes, and the seconder, Councillor Blair? Okay, so now we are looking at this amended motion. We've got a mover and a seconder. Is there going to be any debate, councillors? Councillor Sewell, you wish to speak again? I'll go to the mover and then the seconder if there's going to be debate. Do you wish to add anything else, Councillor O'Donnell? No. Councillor Blair, do you wish to add anything?
Yeah, just the background on it from where we left off when we voted on the zigzag and discussed the zigzag, and I was going to be looking at a petition regarding the protection or assisting with protection or helping for the contracted security guard for the zigzag when we start trying to close it at night, and also allowing more police presence or when they're called, and trying to get more resources into assist with the zigzag and the problems that we've been having. I then, through advice from staff and discussions with councillors, moved to the committee which I sit on for Safety Crime Committee, and then we sorted out this recommended item. That was about all, just giving everyone a bit of an update of how it evolved. And further to that, I've been on further advice from specifically Councillor Boyd, making the adjustment from Forestfield across to Midland for support from basically the head police force for this area.
Thank you. Speaker against the motion, Councillor Sewell.
It's more in relation to the amendment, Madam Chair. I'm just wondering whether it would be more appropriate if, in fact, we wrote to the Minister for Police and then she can make the determination as to where it's best placed to be resolved. I'm a little bit uncomfortable with councillors determining where these kind of queries are, particularly if those councillors have connections to that particular workplace.
CEO,
You want me to have a comment on that?
Yes.
I think you're in debate. What's the question?
So the question is, could it actually go to the Minister? Because I would deem that would be appropriate in this particular instance.
Really, it's council's call. You can ask me to send it to whoever you want, and certainly I see what you're saying. The minister is overarching the entire police force, so we could add that as an amendment if you wanted to.
Councillor Sewell, do you want to make that amendment?
Yeah. So yes, so through the chair, I'd like to make that amendment, please. Thank you.
Okay, so the amendment is that the council requests the Chief Executive Officer write to the WA Minister for Police to arrange a meeting. I'll go back to the mover and see if the mover is happy with that amendment. Yes. Seconder? Yes. So now we have an amended amendment. Does everyone understand what we are saying? Yes. So is there any speaker, is there any other councillor who would like to speak for or against the motion? Councillor Giardina?
Madam Chair, I think we just, in doing that, we're going to muddy the waters. I think what Councillor Boyd has indicated, that we go to the superintendent. He's the boss in that district. Why do we need to go to a minister for something like this? This is his area. It's his Midland District Office, and he's a superintendent. Why would you want to go to a minister for something like this?
Well,
it's crazy.
You can.
I'm happy with that. With what Councillor Boyd has proposed.
Let's put this motion, Councillor Giardina, and then if this motion is lost, we'll go back to a different scenario. Councillor Ritchie, you have a question?
Well, I'm speaking against that second amendment, I suppose, if that's appropriate.
Yes.
I mean, the Minister for Police is simply going to flick it to the superintendent. If we're concerned about the East Metropolitan people, why not write to the Police Commissioner rather than the Minister, if we actually want action? I personally am happy with the superintendent, but if we're concerned about implications of people being in that workplace, why not the Police Commissioner?
Why don't we write to the Minister, the Police Commissioner and the Superintendent?
Can I ask a question as well before Councillor Boyd comes in on this one? I'm just wondering whether, as an act of courtesy, that we still go through what this motion's recommending about the Superintendent Inspector going there, but we also include, as a courtesy to the Minister of Police, our correspondence, to make sure that we've just covered that rather than directing it to the Minister on her or his own. Do it as a situation where we
CC it.
CC them in, but not so much just a CC because it doesn't look as good for the superintendent, but you can put a different wording in to say that we are also including the Minister in this to show that we are open and available for comment and support.
So Councillor Stallard, your amendment to the amended amendment is that we write to the Superintendent or Inspector of the Midland District Office and the Minister for Police.
Yes, you can have
I would accept that amendment in replacement of my amendment, Madam Chair.
Does the mover accept the amendment to the amended amendment? Councillor Boyd.
Yeah, I just wish to speak against that. The premise behind the resolution from CESPAC was to try and build relationships between the city and I guess the local police and the police that would be coming to assist our residents or the security or the City of Kalamunda staff in their time of need. There was some commentary made when we were deliberating the opening of the opening of the zigzag, and from memory, Councillor Ritchie made a comment that of the three meetings, I think it was your committee, Madam Mayor, the representative from Sarsfield Police didn't attend either of the three meetings. Following on from that, I made some queries about, conversations with Sarsfield Police and, their understanding of the issues, our understanding of expectations in regards to their response. And as I said, in view of trying to build relationships, build our understanding of police priorities, police to understand what our community's expectations are, and to try and find a happy medium. CESPAC's resolution was for city staff to meet with the superintendent or inspector so that they became aware of the broader issues associated with the zigzag. As I think it was Councillor Giordano stated, if a letter goes to the minister is going to refer it back down the chain to the superintendent, and if the superintendent isn't aware of it, he's going to refer it on to the OSC of Forestville Police Station. So I would suggest, in the view of trying to build relationships, our port of call would be, as a matter of courtesy, to the Midland District Office. Thank you.
Councillors, just so we know where we are, let's put this motion that's in front of you, which is the Superintendent and the Minister for Police, and if that is lost, we'll go back to the previous amendment. Is everybody happy with that? I'll put this motion that's in front of you. All those in favour? Councillor Sewell, Councillor Stallard, Councillor Giardina, Councillor Cannon, Councillor O'Donnell, Councillor Billich. Yes, well, that's what we're putting. We're putting the motion right in front of us. Sorry, Councillor Cooper, Councillor Blair, Councillor Ritchie, Councillor Thomas, and against Councillor Boyd and Councillor O'Connor. The motion is carried.
Question,
Thank
Madam
you.
Chair.
Yes.
So we dispensed with standing orders and we didn't have a formal debate process and we didn't have a right of reply prior to that vote. Is that going to be something that happens on a regular basis? Or, I did indicate I wanted to speak about five times.
I'm sorry, I didn't see that you wanted to speak.
My hand was like this, up this high.
So can I ask for some advice now?
The question was, is that going to be the new
You know
process?
it isn't, Councillor O'Connor. I do make mistakes. I'm sorry I didn't see you, but you know that it's not going to be how it is.
Can it be deemed, through the chair, can it be deemed that we have voted on the amendments at this stage, not necessarily the whole item? The amendments to include the superintendent and then the minister, or is that not possible now? We've done the whole thing. Okay.
I apologise if I missed you, Councillor O'Connor. It was
That's
an
okay.
error of mine.
That's all right.
I did ask if you accepted writing to... What do you suggest, CEO? Just move on?
I can't suggest anything. You've debated, you've voted now, so it is what it is, unfortunately.
If I may say that
You can bring back a revocation if you want and start over.
If I could just add that this is a perfect situation where councillors need to be ready to call a point of order at any time, because honestly, Councillor O'Connor, you could have point of order immediately, and that stops everything.
I'm fully aware of that.
So yeah, and then it wouldn't have even gone to the vote. So this is a good learning curve for some people to actually do that.
A lot going on.
We're going on to 10.5.12. Are there any questions? Is there a mover for the officer recommendation on page 158? Councillor O'Donnell, seconded by Councillor Sewell. Is there going to be any debate? I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. 10.5.13. Are there any questions? Question, Councillor Boyd.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have a question in regards to the policy. Excuse me. In the policy, section 3.2, under invitation lists, for the citizenship ceremony, it lists the member of Darling Range as one of the invitees. And then for opening ceremonies and associated events, it lists only the member for Kalamunda and member for Forestburn, and the member for Darling Range isn't listed. I'm just wondering if this, where the member of Darling Range has been omitted on purpose, or what the circumstances is there, please.
Can I go to the Manager of Customer and Public Relations to take that question?
Thank you very much for the question, Councillor Boyd. We've taken the list for citizenship ceremonies because that was an established list. So for the purpose of the draft policy, that list currently includes what has been the invitation list for citizenship ceremonies, and the borders have changed, so it wasn't included in for future functions. It is proposed for a draft. We're more than happy as a part of that process to revise that accordingly.
Are there any other questions, councillors? Councillor Ritchie?
I just have a question. I'm aware of those boundary changes, Nicole. Does any part of Darling Range cross over the city now? I'm not sure whether it in fact does cross over the city.
My understanding is that that's a no, which is why when we looked at the appreciation and turning of the sod type events, it didn't carry through into there.
Are there any other questions, councillors? Is there a mover for the officer recommendation on page 162? Councillor Boyd, you wish to move?
Yes, no, just a follow-up question. So obviously if we're going to adopt this, we need to adopt it with that, with an amendment to that policy to remove that. Is that what the manager is indicating?
Manager, you have a comment?
Councillors, this recommendation is only endorsed for advertising. If there are any changes required, we'll make it during the advertising period and bring it back with a final version for adoption.
Councillors, are you happy with that? Are there any other questions? Is there a mover for the officer recommendation on page 162? Councillor O'Connor, seconded by Councillor Stallard. Is there going to be any debate? I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Australian Masters Games Cycling. Do you have any questions, councillors? Is there a mover for the officer recommendation on page 166? Councillor Stallard, seconded by Councillor Sewell. Is there going to be any debate? I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Motions of which previous notice has been given. There are none. Questions by members without notice. Councillors, Councillor Ritchie.
Thank you. This is just really one for public interest as much as anything else. I know that the Director did give us a little bit of briefing on our exposure to Pindan, and I just wonder if it's worth repeating in council, because I think some councillors weren't there, because we know that we use Pindan for the Kalamunda Community Centre. I'm just wondering if you could give us an update if we do have any exposure to that. Thank you.
Director of Asset Services.
Thank you, through the chair. So just to clarify the situation, the contract the city entered into for the Kalamunda Community Centre building was with a company called Pindan Contracting, which is a subsidiary of the Pindan Group. That Pindan Contracting is currently in administration. It is not being liquidated. There are other subsidiaries of Pindan that have been liquidated, and it's a different issue. So the administrator, Ernst & Young, or EY as they're called now, is in contact with the city, working through the issues of where we are at the present time. I might say the building at the moment is in a defects liability period, which means essentially the project is completed and open, as we all know. So our exposure is a lot less than other projects that are yet to be completed. I also would add, we do hold a security in the form of an unconditional bank guarantee that if Pindan do not complete the works during the defect liability period, we have recall to a cash sum that we can use to do the works necessary.
Follow-up question, Councillor
Just a follow-up question. That money, is that protected from the liquidators?
Thank you for your question. It is an unconditional bank guarantee given between the City of Kalamunda and the National Australia Bank.
Councillor Steyer, do you have a question?
Yes, a follow-up to that particular question. Do we know for certain that all of the subbies, contractors and people involved have all been paid out in this particular process, in this situation?
Through the Chair, no, we do not know for certain the status of contractor subcontractor payments.
I have a follow-up question. Does this make the city nervous about so-called corporate scorecards in the future?
Through the Chair, I don't believe so. We really believe the circumstances have significantly moved in the period of time between when the city let the contract to Pindan Contracting, partly based on the corporate scorecard decision reached and the circumstances they now find themselves in. That is probably the nature of the beast in terms of building contracts. I would draw the analogy, a lot of reputable and strong builders have gone into administration in the last 5 years, and you'd be very surprised that they've done it based on their strong performances previously. It's something that I don't believe the corporate scorecard system would have predicted the future, as it were.
Councillor Ritchie.
And sorry, just one follow-up question for the Director. As you say, we're not aware of any subcontractors that haven't been paid. Has anyone contacted the city with regards to that?
Sorry, through the Chair, the question put to me was, were we aware that all contractors have been paid? And I said, we're not aware if all contractors have been paid. It's a different question, to just draw a clarification. We have been contacted by some subcontractors regarding payment.
Are there any other questions about any other topics?
Can I just add, if I may add to that, and those people that have contacted us have been put in contact with Ernst & Young, who the administrators are. So that's the process. So anyone that we get, if subsequently contacts, we'll be joining them with Ernst & Young, the administrators.
Are there any other questions? Councillor Steyer.
Just one more to follow up on that. Sorry to prolong it. I suppose, is there an opportunity that if this is the case, that there are some, that any of those funds that we have for the $220,000, is that accessible, or in any way can that be accessible by any of the people who are still owed funds, or would we even consider such a move in the case that this occurs?
Through the Chair, the guarantee we've got is 120,000, not 220,000. Thank you. And moreover, it's a guarantee that if Pindan do not complete the defects liability period, they are in administration. Ernst EY are working through the administration issues. At this point in time, we have not received advice that Pindan have stopped honouring the defects liability contract. That is the administrator's role. So for us to make premature decisions regarding contractor payments is far too soon at this point in time.
Are there any other questions without notice? Councillor Blair.
Just a quick question regarding the zigzag, that the barriers have been installed at the bottom of the zigzag concrete block barriers, and concerned about emergency services, and if they need to get into the zigzag from the bottom, how would they get in there?
Director of Asset Services.
Thank you. Through the Chair, we're doing our best at the moment to combat temporary arrangements due to the proliferation of people attacking the gates and removing them. So we're doing moves all the time, and that was just an interim step at this present time to try and get the gates back up.
Councillor O'Connor, you have a question?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can the Director advise on the expected start date for the roundabout on the Matavara Road off-ramp, please?
Thank you. Through the Chair, we are advised now that the last hurdle to stop construction on site is the Minister's approval to close the Roe Highway off-ramp. That requires a ministerial approval. We're advised by Main Roads that we should anticipate that somewhere in about the 14th of June, and then we'll commence as soon as we can thereafter.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions without notice? Thank you. There is a question of which due notice has been given, and the answer is provided there to Councillor Boyd. Item 14, there's no urgent business approved by the presiding member. So we now go to item 15, meeting closed to the public. And can I have a mover that we close this meeting to the public? Councillor O'Donnell, seconded by Councillor Giardina. All those in favour? Carried unanimously.